We all think we know why Henry VIII rejected Anne of Cleves. The story goes that she was plain, awkward, and so unattractive that Henry called her a Flanders mare. That phrase has haunted Anne's legacy for centuries. But here's a twist. Henry never actually said it. The insult was invented decades later by a historian who wasn't even alive during Anne's lifetime. So what really happened? Was Anne truly unattractive, or was the problem Henry himself? Let's go back in time to know what really happened. By the late 1530s, Henry VIII had already been through 3 wives: Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, and Jane Seymour. Now Henry needed a 4th wife. Not just to keep the Tudor dynasty safe, but for political survival. He had split from the Catholic Church, been excommunicated, and tensions with France and the Holy Roman Empire were rising. To secure his Protestant reputation, Henry looked to the German states, and the Duchy of Cleves, ruled by Anne's brother William, was a perfect match. Anne came with good Protestant credentials. She was quiet, modest, and dutiful. Not conventionally educated, but she could read and write in German, was excellent at needlework, and was raised with a strict moral code. She had never been to court and lived a very private life. That would prove important later. Hans Holbein the Younger was sent to paint her portrait, and what he delivered thrilled Henry. She looked young, serene, and gentle, her hands folded, her dress jeweled, her expression reserved. Henry was sold. He agreed to marry her before even meeting her. But when Anne finally arrived in England, Henry made a bold and ultimately disastrous decision. Following an old romantic tradition, he disguised himself as a messenger and burst into Anne's room while she was watching bear baiting out her window. He expected her to be overcome with love, to recognize him at once, despite the ragged cloak and fake identity. Instead, Anne, who didn't speak English and had no idea about this bizarre ritual, recoiled in shock. A sweaty, aggressive stranger had just grabbed and kissed her without warning. She turned away, confused, likely afraid, and utterly unaware she had just bruised the king's ego beyond repair. Henry stormed out, humiliated. From that moment he couldn't stand her. He confided to his courtiers, "I like her not. She is nothing as well as she was spoken of." And just like that, everyone around him began agreeing with the king. No one dared say otherwise. But was Anne really unattractive? Was Anne of Cleves ugly? Or did she look different from Holbein's painting? Well, before Anne's disastrous first meeting with Henry, everyone was impressed by her appearance and quiet dignity. And Holbein was never punished or discredited for the painting. In fact, Henry continued to commission his work. That alone suggests the portrait wasn't misleading. Henry simply changed his mind. In fact, the French ambassador at the time described Anne as of middling beauty. He even claimed that she looked better than Catherine Howard, the young lady Henry would soon fall madly for. The infamous Flanders mare insult? That didn't come from Henry at all. It was coined by Bishop Gilbert Burnet more than a century later, yet it stuck, unfairly defining Anne's reputation for centuries. So what was really going on? Henry was going through what we might call a midlife crisis, the Tudor edition. He was overweight, suffering from gout, with a festering leg ulcer that never quite healed. He still saw himself as the handsome prince of his youth, despite being in his late 40s in a world where people didn't age gently. He needed a wife who flattered him, adored him, and told him he was still irresistible. Anne didn't know how to do that. She was formal, reserved, and unfamiliar with the flirty, polished world of the English court. Meanwhile, Henry had already noticed another woman, Catherine Howard, the teenage cousin of Anne Boleyn. She was everything Anne wasn't: giggly, playful, young, and eager to please. Anne never stood a chance. Once Henry had decided Anne wasn't what he wanted, he began looking for a way out, and it didn't take long to find one. Henry said he couldn't consummate the marriage. He blamed Anne's appearance, her body, her breath, even her breasts. But in the same breath, he insisted he wasn't impotent, claiming he had 2 nocturnal emissions just to prove he still had it. Henry also revived a childhood betrothal Anne had once had with the Duke of Lorraine's son. The engagement had long since been called off, but Henry used it as a legal loophole to declare the marriage invalid. Anne didn't protest. She saw what had happened to women who challenged Henry before her. Instead, she agreed to everything, and in return, she won something no other of Henry's wives did: her freedom. In the end, Anne of Cleves became the wife Henry rejected, but also the only one who truly won. When their marriage was annulled in July 1540, she walked away with £4,000 a year, which was an enormous sum at the time, multiple luxurious properties, including Richmond Palace and Hever Castle, dozens of gowns, plates, and jewels, and the title of the King's Sister, giving her precedence over every woman in England except the future Queen and the King's daughters. Anne never remarried. She made friends with Mary Tudor and especially bonded with little Princess Elizabeth, who would often visit her at Richmond. She played music, danced, dressed fashionably, even had her own kitchen built to experiment with spices and cooking, a rare hobby for noble women at the time. When Catherine Howard was executed just 2 years later, Anne's brother proposed she marry Henry again. Anne politely declined. Publicly, she played the rejected woman once more. But in private, she was probably thrilled. Anne lived through the rest of Henry's reign, through Edward VI's, and even appeared at Mary's coronation in 1553, riding just behind the new queen in a place of honor. She had converted to Catholicism without fuss, possibly remembering her own mixed upbringing with a Lutheran father and Catholic mother. She never returned to court again, but she lived comfortably until 1557, when she died peacefully, the last of Henry's 6 wives to pass away. So why did Henry really reject Anne of Cleves? Because she didn't flatter him, because she didn't play his games, because she didn't pretend he was the prince he used to be. She failed to feed his vanity, and for that, he turned against her. But in the end, Anne was the only one who walked away with her head, her wealth, and her freedom. She may not have been queen for long, but she won. And maybe, just maybe, she was the cleverest of them all.